Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another video with On Point Politics, your number one stop for all things polling and election analysis that isn't beholden to any mainstream media source. Make sure to hit the like button and to subscribe if you want more content just like this. Today, we're going to be going over some basis electoral map analysis with Retaking the Nation. So say hello.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
All right, guys. So Retaking the Nation has done some of his own content and whatnot, and we're inviting him on because I kind of like his takes and whatnot. So we're going to be talking about the individual states and kind of the state of the race and where everything is going right now. And so looking at the national level, I mean, Trump's never been up in the popular vote 6 days before the election. Like, that's just never happened ever. So it's crazy to see that he is now up by, I mean, he's up barely, but he's never been tied or even up in the popular vote a week before the election. I want to hear your thoughts about this.
Yeah, I mean, I remember in 2016, even 2020, Biden and Clinton's leads were always just massive, especially Biden's. Their polls coming out, Biden plus 10, plus 11. We're not even close to that now. And they're still trying to convince us that Harris is favored or has a shot. And it's like Trump lost by what, 60,000 votes across 3 states in 2020. If he's leading in popular vote polls, it really makes me question whether Harris even has a shot in this election. Even if Trump gains votes in like New York and California, he's going to be gaining across the board and really just overtaking the Democrats in the swing states, particularly the Rust Belt swing states.
No, yeah. So it's pretty interesting because, yeah, I mean, he's never been ahead by this much. And yeah, we did have polls. I mean, it says it right here. Biden on average was ahead by 7.5 points 4 years ago. So she's polling 8 points worse than Joe Biden was a few years back. And so the problem is when you look at this now, it's just a huge problem because it's not necessarily the Democrat that gets over underestimated. It's the Republican Donald Trump share that always gets underestimated. And if you were to add 3 points to him, he's getting like 51.4% to Harris's 48, which would be absolutely ridiculous if that happened. Now, in reality, if you look at the multi-candidate polling, the similar polling error would actually be more reasonable because they're both at about 47. If he gained about like 3 points, 2 points from a polling error, he'd be up like 2 or 3 in the popular vote. And that's usually what he's gotten for the most part. And Kamala's favorables also too, a lot of the times they've been her favorables, there's a good chance they're overinflated as well, which could end up being an unexpected surprise on election day too. I mean, that could be a big problem for her as well. And so it's going to be a pretty big problem going into the election. We'll see how things end up there. But the fact he's even tied in the popular vote or even up a few days before the election is completely insane. And Biden's approval rating is going back down again. It's been going back up again ever since, September. It's just been going more and more and more down because he came back at like 42 in the beginning of September. And then funny enough, right as the debate was coming along, that's when his approval rating started getting worse. And when we look at the Gallup polling here, which is something really interesting that I think a lot of people should be reading about, I necessarily think that this is one of the better metrics. Okay, I don't know why this is not loading up right now. Usually, what in the world? What's going on? Why is this like not loading right now? This like always loads. What the? What?
The link's like broken.
I guess it is broken. Man, that's so annoying. That's weird. Yeah, whatever. I'll just cut that out. We'll talk about the Atlas Intel poll.
I'll just add this real quick. Not to mention Trump is polling at his highest ceiling ever. So in 2020 and 2016, the best he ever polled was maybe 45, 46%. But keep in mind now he's polling at 48+%, which is an all new high for him. So it's not that he's facilitating his base, he's gaining supporters. So he's gaining even more supporters from 2020 and 2016. Shows a major turnout advantage for him.
Right. Not only that, right now, Trump's actually polling better than he even was against Biden, by the way, because he finished out at 47.9%, which is the highest he had ever been polling against Biden here since May. But when you look now, he's actually polling higher than he was when even Biden was in the race, which is pretty interesting. I think that's very, very fascinating to see there. So when we look at this now in terms of Atlas Intel, which is the most accurate pollster that had Biden plus 4.7 in the popular vote, the vote shares were about right. We see that Donald Trump is up by 2.5 points in the popular vote in the full ballot question. Harris getting about 47% to Trump's 49.5%. And we see that college whites are just not there. College, or at least college educated voters, she's only winning them by like 15. He's winning non-college by quite a bit. And not only that, Donald Trump on the full ballot question is actually winning women outright in the Atlas poll, while only winning men by 4 or by 5, roughly, give or take. So it's a weird sample, but they've been one of the more accurate pollsters. And you see with whites, he's winning them by about 12 points, which he won them by 13 last time. So if they underestimate him with whites again, you may be in for a pretty big surprise. He's getting about 41% of Hispanics. He's winning the other vote outright by a plurality. He's getting 43% of the Asian vote. He's getting 28% of black voters, and he's only losing the suburban voter by like a quarter of a point. He's losing urban voters by 9, winning rural by like over almost 30 something points. Like, these are crazy numbers. We actually see here that for whatever reason, even in this poll, even though Kamala is actually winning like a decent crossover amount of Republicans, which is kind of weird. Their other polling had Donald Trump winning the crossover advantage. But even here, Trump's still winning independents by like 2 points. And when you see the people who did not vote in the last election, Donald Trump is winning them by 7 points. And Harris is only getting 88% of the 2020 vote for Joe Biden, which is interesting. And not only that, you see that Donald Trump's getting 8% of the 2020 vote, which is really interesting. So there's a lot of bad signs right now for Donald Trump, or for Kamala Harris, excuse me, as of right now in the polling data. And so using this and the fact, this is something interesting I wanted to point out. Look at this result for Kamala Harris. This is when she got elected to the Attorney General's position in 2010 in California. And she barely won this race because the Republican had a third-party challenger, the Constitutionalist Party, and other right-wing third parties that were taking away votes from him. So if it wasn't for that, she would have lost this race by like 8 or 9 points. And this was like her first like big statewide race. What are your thoughts on like the Atlas poll in this? Because I think this is pretty damning that she could barely win an attorney general's race in California, even though this was a pretty blue state.
I would say the Harris campaign is caught between the bad side of an alignment and a reversion. So whites with a college degree is a group I'm very familiar with in my home state. And in 2020, many believed that they were making the sensible choice by voting for Biden over crazy Donald Trump and thought things would go back to normal after voting for Biden. Well, they learned that things just got worse as we entered the Biden administration. They just see Harris as an extension of that and less credible than Biden since she wasn't actually nominated and has never been president. So we're seeing white college educated voters stay or move back to Donald Trump. And then we're seeing groups such as Muslim Americans now flocking to Donald Trump, black voters, Hispanic voters. So Harris is just bleeding support. And then voters that she basically borrowed for a cycle, or Biden borrowed for a cycle, are just not turning out, not motivated to turn out, or are voting for Donald Trump again. And so it's a double-edged sword that she's kind of stuck with and won't be getting those groups. And she has performed very weak electorally, as you can see here with the 2010 California Attorney General election. So it's very tough for Democrats to congeal a base together when their voters are unmotivated. They don't want to turn out. They're going back to Donald Trump, and the Republican Party is making gains with groups they typically do well with. I mean, we saw some polls come out where Donald Trump was winning Muslim Americans outright. I mean, if he even improves with the group by 20 or 30 points, you can kiss Michigan goodbye. So she's in a very tough pickle where she's not gaining voters and she's just continuing to lose groups that reliably vote Democrat.
No, yeah, and if we look at, yeah, I mean, we'll probably do like a consensus map for this video. I mean, at least for states that we agree aren't going to go either way. I mean, basically all the ones I'm filling out in red will basically go Republican. I don't really think that these are debatable right now. I think probably for Iowa and Ohio, we can both agree those aren't going Republican at or going Democrat at all. I think these are going to be solidly in the Republican column. I mean, Trump won them pretty handily in both elections, so I don't really see why he would be losing any of these by that amount either. Florida, we can add that into like the for sure is not going blue column now, which is crazy because 4 years ago, I would have thought that somebody would have been nuts for even saying that. I thought Biden technically still had a chance at winning Florida, which was true. He technically did have a statistical possibility to win Florida, but looking at this now, I mean, Trump is just blowing it out of the water in Florida in the early voting because of the fact that Republicans are out by a tremendous amount. I mean, you have, just 45% Republican to 33% Democrat. Like, that's actually freaking insane that that's even happening right now. So I think Florida's locked up. What do you think about Texas?
I mean, Texas, I think Trump will improve on his 2020 margin. Whether it's a 10-point victory, a 9-point victory, I'm not sure on, but I think in terms of like a probability standpoint, Harris has no chance of winning Texas at this point. They're not pouring any resources there. The rally there was a disaster with the whole Beyonce thing. So yeah, I think she has
Yeah.
basically no shot. Trump has a better shot at winning a state like New Jersey than I think Harris win Texas.
Yeah, I think given the environment that we're in, I actually think that is theoretically possible. California, Oregon, Washington, I don't really see those being going anywhere. I think Colorado could unexpectedly, if it's a good night for Trump and he overperforms with Hispanics, like if he just has a really good night with Hispanics and he ties nationwide with Hispanics, like let's say something crazy happens, he could actually get close in Colorado. Like he could get within 3 to 4 points, but I think as of right now, it's like a 7 to 8 point win for Harris. But I don't really believe it would be able to go into the column for Donald Trump right now. I think Illinois, it's going to be a lot closer. I think it'll be just a 8, 9 point win for Harris, but I don't think that that's going to be in reach. New York, something interesting is going on there because there could be a night where if Trump's just doing really well with Hispanic and Black voters, it could unexpectedly be one of those states that it's just like a shocker and it gets under 5. But I think as of right now, it'll probably be like a 12 or 13 point race for Kamala Harris in the state. District of Columbia is gone. And Hawaii, even though you had the Maui fires and stuff like that, I think it's still going to be in the safe Democrat column. In Alaska as well, I mean, Maine's second, Maine's first is going to go blue. So I think this is a pretty good consensus map. Probably even New Jersey. It could unexpectedly get close, but I think it'll still go Democrat at the end of the day. So I feel like this is a fair like toss-up map for the election, in my opinion. So if you want to run us down through some of these states and then I could take over for some, we can do that.
Yeah, that sounds great. I think for states that people are considering likely, I'm not bought into the New Mexico thing quite yet. It still looks like a very favorable state for Harris. So the margin may be closer than expected, but I think Donald Trump winning the state seems a little far fetched to me. The state I'm interested in a lot though is the state of Virginia, which went almost safe for Biden in 2020. We're seeing a lot of interesting numbers come out of Virginia. Republicans have gotten some recent victories there. The state legislature elections last year, I think the popular vote for the state was basically tied. If Republicans needed metrics to be close in Virginia, they're getting them. So I don't know if Trump can win it, but we'll see early in election night. If Trump is closer than expected and he's performing well in the rural areas and in Nova, that could be a really alarming sign for the Harris campaign very early in the night.
Right. Now, I think as for like North Carolina and Georgia, I mean, I think I think these are completely gone. We'll put Virginia and New Mexico in like the lean column due to the stuff that you said. I think North Carolina, Georgia, I think those are done. I mean, the electorate in Georgia, the black vote, even with souls to the polls, which only rose the electorate 0.12% African American, uh, they fell below 26% in Georgia. In North Carolina, if Trump's losing Georgia by like a few points, then North Carolina is going to end up going the same way because Georgia and North Carolina are somewhat similar in their demography in some ways. So that
Wait,
is definitely something to consider about those two.
could you explain a little bit? It seems like we're getting a large disparity between how Republicans are looking in early voting in North Carolina, but the polling looks like the state is close. And I don't really buy the polling. I don't think Harris has a shot at winning North Carolina, especially if Trump is performing in the popular vote by, 4, 5 points better. I just don't see it swinging that hard to the left. And will Mark
No, it
Robinson on the
wouldn't.
ballot hurt Trump at all?
No, I don't think that it would hurt. I don't think Mark Robinson is going to hurt Trump. If anything, I actually think Mark Robinson still has a chance to win the election. I think if Trump's winning the state by the margin that I have him winning it by, which is about 8, which is pretty big, Mark Robinson and Stein are going to be in for a really tight governorship race. It could really go either way. Like, that's the only race right now that I'm kind of like, yeah, it could go either way right now. It's not going to be Stein plus, 15 like some of these pollsters have it. It's just not. And actually, if you look right now, I believe that Cooper was actually polling better right now than even Stein was in the aggregate. I believe
Yeah.
so. And even if you look at some, like to like polling comparisons, Stein is polling worse than Cooper is right now. So it's not completely out of the question for Mark Robinson to win that race, especially if Trump's winning by 8 points in the state or 7 points in the state of North Carolina. I think the bare minimum for Mark to have a chance would have to be like a 5 or 6 point win in the state. And everybody forgets that Mark Robinson actually got more votes than Donald Trump in North Carolina in the 2020 election. He actually got more raw votes in North Carolina. Did you know that or no?
No, I actually didn't. I didn't know that. I don't, because he was running as
Yeah,
attorney
Mark.
general, I think, at that point.
Yeah,
But you
Mark.
are
No,
right
but
because
Mark. No, Mark
yeah,
Robinson actually got more raw votes than Donald Trump. So that's why when people tell me, oh, he's got no chance, it's like, does that really make any sense? He literally got more votes in a state that Trump barely won in. As an incumbent president, the attorney general candidate got more votes than the top of the ticket. And
and
not
I do
even by like a
remember.
little bit. It was like 100, 200,000 votes. Like,
Yeah,
it was a pretty decent improvement in terms of raw votes. So that's pretty impressive. And so to me, him losing 15, 16, 17 is just like completely out of the realm of possibility for me.
yeah, and I do remember Dan Forest polling very poorly early on in that race against Roy Cooper, and it ended up coming down to the wire. So anything is possible for sure. I think
Right.
in terms of the state, New Hampshire is not one I'm sold on yet, but we're seeing closer polling. I still think it's tilt maybe to lean Harris. We could end up being tilt. We just don't know. Not
Mhm.
Michigan though. But and then Minnesota, I think Harris is favored, but on a good night, Trump could squeak it out. It's possible. 2016 was a very close race.
Should I put it lean or tilt?
I would put it lean for now, but
Mhm.
we just didn't get a lot of polling out of Minnesota this cycle.
Nope. That's the thing about these states. We haven't gotten a lot of polling out of Minnesota, New Mexico, Virginia, or New Hampshire. We also haven't gotten a lot of polling out of them ever since Biden dropped out of the race for some reason,
Hmm.
which is kind of
Yeah,
interesting.
I do think Nebraska's second is probably lean Harris at this point. Whether Republicans
Yeah,
pull out the
I actually have that too. That's the funny
yeah,
part. Out of all my bold predictions, I still have Nebraska second going blue. It still
because
goes
Dan
leaning
Bacon
blue.
is even polling slightly behind his Democrat opponent, so it could be closer than
Right.
expected. But I think Harris is favored there.
Right. No, I think so too. And looking at some of these other states, what do you think about Arizona and Nevada?
Well, I'm very, very optimistic about Arizona, despite I think one poll came out.
You were like, you were the biggest black pill on Arizona in the
I,
universe at one point.
I was, but everything is looking good. Trump is polling very well there. I don't know if I'd give a
Yeah.
likely margin, but I think Trump winning by 4, very, very possible. Nevada, the early vote looks amazing there. Trump is
Oh yeah, it
polling
looks
well
great.
there.
And the state votes majority early vote too. So if Republicans are they're up by 6 now in Nevada.
In Clark
In the,
County, I think they're winning Clark County in early votes. So
which
there's
is
no good
crazy. Wait, they're
metrics
up
for
in
Harris
the
in Nevada.
combined? They're up in the mail-in and early vote combined in Clark?
Yeah, that's what it looks like. And so there's no
Whoa,
good.
that is nuts. That is actually really crazy. Wow. I didn't even
Yeah.
know that. Man, that and I have Trump winning the state by like a little over 5. So honestly, with those early voting numbers, that's not that unrealistic.
I mean, he barely lost in 2020, and a
Right.
lot of the unions are very upset with Harris. If we see a swing with Hispanics, we could see, Bush 2004 numbers in Nevada, no problem.
Right. And now looking at the Rust Belt plus Maine, we should actually touch Maine first. What do you think about Maine right now?
I mean, I think it's probably likely to lean Harris. I just don't know. We have barely any polling there. And,
Right.
there's a lot of, white rural voters, and it's possible they swing heavily to the right like 2016. I just don't have a great read on it because we just don't have any data.
Right. And then what are you thinking about for the three Rust Belt states?
I do think Wisconsin is Trump's strongest state. He could easily win it by 3. I think that's very possible and get Hovde over the finish line. Pennsylvania looks good for Republicans. Michigan is Trump's toughest one, but I think right now he's favored in all 3, but he only needs 1 is the key. And so, I think he's got the election shirt up at this point. Michigan is really, really close for me, but I would give it a tilt margin for sure. Pennsylvania, the early vote for Republicans looks strong. Harris just isn't turning out the voters right now. And the polling is looking
Right.
great for Trump in Pennsylvania. We had some polls from Fox and Quinnipiac drop today showing Trump with the lead. Trump's never had
Right.
leads like this heading into Pennsylvania.
Right. And so that is it, guys, for this video. Donald Trump in our analysis map is looking at Donald Trump with 312 electoral college votes to Harris's 226 electoral college votes. So make sure to go ahead and hit the like button, guys. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Make sure to check out Retaking the Nation down below in the description as well. Any last comments?
No. I think Trump is favored right now. By how much, I'm not sure, but I've gone from the race is a toss-up to I think the consensus now is Trump is definitely favored. He's polling well. The early vote is going well for him. He's got the momentum on his side. There's no good numbers or metric for Harris right now. So I just can't, pull the trigger for her because she's just losing in every way. And even internals are showing that she's basically given up on the campaign. So Trump looks favored and you need to get out and vote.
All right, guys. See you guys in the next video.